I'm very excited about Christmas and my Christmas sweater. Somebody in the comments, do you know where "Bye, buddy, hope you find your dad" comes from? I love that one so much. I think that's my favorite Christmas movie. To be honest, like my favorite one to watch. I mean, there's so many good ones, but like that one's so great. So great.
Die Hard for me.
Die Hard, nice.
It's just so campy.
It's so good.
Yeah.
The first one though, I tried to watch the second one, and that was a kind of miserable movie. Do you like the second one?
That's the one at the airport, right?
Yeah, at the airport.
Yeah.
That one was kind of like, and then also they get all their gun facts wrong.
Yeah. I mean, everything is like.
Well, that's why it's campy, right?
Yeah. Like that is why I like even the first one too, because they're just that would never happen. That would never happen.
No.
That would never happen.
But that's what's great about it. It is a Christmas movie. We agree, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
And if you disagree, you're wrong.
That's true. It's just factual. Well, as we embrace the holiday trauma, let us talk about some trauma therapy techniques. There was a great one that came from our very own, well-practiced, probably one of the best that I know of when it comes to like informal trance, like using culture and like talking about trance from like a cultural perspective. Dr. Adam Baldowski.
Yes.
And so we were having a conversation, and we were kind of like staffing a case, and sort of the topic came up about like sort of best practices with this particular case. And so we talked about two topics, circle therapy and systematic desensitization. And they're very different. One is very linear and one is more cyclical. And they treat trauma and help somebody get over like a traumatic sort of event or experience, both deep and shallow. Like systematic desensitization and circle therapy is great for like fear of flying, smoking cessation, stuff like that, or really deep like systematic stuff. But they do have different like target audiences, right? And so I want to talk about that today because it was a good conversation I had with Adam, and I think I want to share it with everybody else.
Yeah, and I think that knowing the difference between the two is what gives both of them the power that they need.
Yes, agreed.
Because it brings intention to it, and then therefore some sort of therapeutic intervention. Where if you know about one but not the other, or if you think that they're the same, it's going to cause a lot of problems. Right.
And I kind of like to set the stage for this. I was talking with Adam, and I was saying my thought about this was the client in question. There was a situation that seemed to have no like antecedent event. There was nothing that like started this like fear phobia thing, and the family and the therapist involved were making it very emotional. And they were like looking for like, well, where did it come from? Like, why did this start? Does it go back to childhood? And I was like, my advice was make it absolutely behavioral. Because I think since the environment around this individual was pushing so emotional, it wasn't giving the client any space and was actually giving them permission to not dig deep themselves.
Yeah.
And so my recommendation was don't touch the emotions at all. Just treat it like a phobia. And by doing that, my suggestion was, I think that the client on their own will find sort of the antecedent. Where did this come from? Why did this start? Because sometimes when I push hard, they don't.
Well, and oftentimes it can be like protected by their unconscious mind. Like, I'm not ready to actually deal with this. And like forcing that can be very traumatic.
That is true too.
Like there's a lot of theoretical orientations that force that, and you see these terrible abreactions. And so just keeping it behavioral has a huge benefit, because what it can do is, like you were saying, you can be talking about this subject and it's safe, and you don't have to address this other thing over here. You can just allow this thing to be where it is, and then when this gets safe, they kind of build the skills, they kind of build the resilience over here. Then all of a sudden that foundation, or the thing that came in at the very beginning of the trauma, actually just pops up.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll also have clients they'll come in and they'll be like, I didn't even connect these things, but in the week between sessions, like I realized like this is something that my parents never did for me, or this is something that I totally forgot about. and it's absolutely connected.
Agreed. And there's magic to that, because when I offer, because sometimes it's obvious. It's like, okay, I know where this comes from. I've seen this 100 times. Like, this stems back to probably this relationship at about this age, and this is probably the dynamics that took place.
But they're not there.
But they're not there yet. And so sometimes, and this is where I hope you all take this as encouragement, being a younger therapist, or at least younger in the trauma field, can actually be of a huge benefit, because you don't know where the client needs to go. And sometimes that blind ignorance helps the client come to those realizations on their own, because a more seasoned therapist, they're like, I've seen this 100 times. I know where this is going. One, you don't.
Yeah.
And it's unique to each person. And then two, if you kind of give that suggestion, like, hey, this is probably where this comes from, it robs it of the impact that it would have for the client when they realize it on their own. Yeah, they come back and they're like, oh my God, Zach, I get it.
And it also validates the resistance too when you do that. Because it's just like, then it goes from me being on your team to me being the teacher or the father that they didn't have, or something along those lines, where it's just like, let me tell you. And I don't like that.
I took Oliver to Fort Christmas. You ever been to Fort Christmas? Yeah. It's so great, right?
I have not been there, but I know what it is.
Oh, you haven't been there?
No.
Oh my gosh, Atticus would love it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. Anyways, but I was at Fort Christmas, which is a local park, and it's like real classic Florida, right? They got a bunch of like colonial homes that are preserved, and you can walk through them and see what they look like, and they've got like the original fort that was there, and so you can like walk in it and see it. And so, I was with my son and my wife, and I was listening to and watching some of the other kids and the parents, and there were two experiences that happened. One was this kid like came in up the stairs and just didn't say hi, nothing, just started telling me facts about like this stuff, and like, did you know? And I was like, oh, that poor child's dad. I was like, this child has no area to like explore and like be himself. He just like has to, his only perceived value is I have to correct other people's information. And so you can like see the robbed value there in that. That was number one. And then the second one is this kid comes up to grandma with this acorn and was like so excited. He's like, Grandma, have you ever seen an acorn this big? And the grandma was like, something like, yeah, I've seen ones that big and some are bigger. And I was like, come on, man. Like, that was not the point.
Yeah.
The point was,
this is amazing. Look what I found.
You're right. That's amazing. And like all he's doing is he's picking up a stick and like poking chickens with it. And I'm like, wow, it's so cool. Look at that chicken. It's making a noise. You poked it. He's like trying to feed the chicken a stick. And I was like, wow, look at that. Is the chicken eating the stick? No. And we're just exploring together. Like, all that to say, like, I think that models some of the, what I'm talking about, right? Like, have that moment. It's not about the facts. Like, sure, there's probably a bigger acorn for your client, but that's not the point. Your client's trying to share something with you.
Yeah.
Be excited with them. Connect with the emotion, not with the facts.
Yeah, that just like triggers something. Last weekend,
it's a good story.
Not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we went to Medieval Times, which was Atticus, my son, was like. At first he was just like, I don't know what we're doing, and then
it's a lot,
and then it is a lot, and he was very shy. He's a very shy kid, and by the end of it, we're like cheering and just like going crazy. It's all scripted. If you've never been,
of course, but it's so good.
But it's so good. It's so campy and like I know he didn't impact you that hard. Like you threw yourself back, but it
was dramatic.
In the middle of it, like we were the bad guys.
Ooh,
or the bad guy. And we were cheering for our night, and he comes back.
It's like a
out.
black and red one, I think, right?
I think they switch it.
Oh yeah. Okay, cool,
this time it was the green one.
Nice.
And we get to the point where they like take the bad guy off, and we're all booing and stuff like that, and Atticus is like cheering. He's got his flag that he's waving and all of this stuff, and he's like the Green Knight comes back out again, and then out of Addie's mouth he just yells, they're fighting, he just yells, cut his head off.
Yes.
My immediate like the two people that were in front of us like looked up in this like face of disgust, like, why would a kid say that? Like, what's going on? And then I was just like, well, like, I hope that he doesn't die, bud. But like, yeah, man, like, you're really getting into it. Like, let's have fun. And I going like thinking that I see where you're going with that. Is like the little traumas that we have that are based on these like conditionings that none of it's like, if I were to admonish his or like push his excitement of that down, kind of like what the dad probably did over there, is like it tells him that feeling that you have is not good. You need to be like one of the good boys. Let me show you how to be a good boy. And then what happens is that we grow up with this like idea about how everything should be that turns into a situation where it's just, we get older and it's like, I don't want to be a good boy. That one.
Yeah. Well, and for me, like what I'm taking away from these stories is a lot of what I've been talking with my clients over the past couple weeks. Like I feel like the closer we get to the holidays, like of the time of this recording, it is the Monday before Thanksgiving on Thursday. And so I feel like the closer we get to really this month season where people go through a lot of emotional upheaval, I've been admonishing my clients and encouraging them and reminding them that there's a huge difference between the emotions that are felt and the actions that are behaved.
Yeah.
And so many times, you know, we feel something and we go immediately to action before we even understand what it is that we felt.
Yeah.
Right. And so they'll be like, well, I did this, or I felt this, or this is what's going on. I was like, is that really what's going on? And so my role in a lot of the sessions, I mean, geez, I feel like really for a lot of people over the past 2 weeks has been slowing down and being like, what are you feeling? Right? I feel like and I tell my interns this all the time, what is so much more valuable of a question than why? But I feel like as therapists, we often prioritize why over what. And the truth of it is, why doesn't matter. And if you answer what well enough, why becomes apparent. And so if you're reaching for a why, but struggling with it, and it doesn't feel like it's really connected, it's because you haven't fully understood the what. And an example of, you know, what I'm meaning here is when you really fully flesh out and you know what it is you're feeling, you know, not just I feel bad or I feel sad, but the nuances of sad, the directions of sad, you know, and you look deeper into that, why becomes very clear. You can't miss it. But so many times we try and go right to why, which is an action type of question, and we miss the what. And it robs therapy of its impact. And I really think that's the magic of hypnosis versus some other type of trauma therapies like EMDR and ART. It's very much about why. Let's go back. Let's, you know, look at that event. What if I don't know what the event is?
Yeah.
What if I don't have clarity?
Or even worse, like, what if I believe that trance that I was put in before I could think for myself is true, and I'm attached to it being true? Like that little kid with the acorn, like the what there, like the kid's excited, the kid's feeling joy, the kid's feeling like curiosity. And what happens if he grows up and it just like really believes he can't be curious about something unless everybody else thinks that it's also curious? And then he believes that, and he like creates an identity around that. Just going with that, like, well, why is this? Well, because your mom, like your mom, your grandma, or whoever it was
like mom or grandma, yeah.
Like diminished your excitement when you were a kid. That's not enough to change who you are. Well, it is when you see like not only was she doing that, but society over and over and over and over and over and over and over again does the same thing.
Well, and look at the precedent it sets, right? we learn our conscious thinking from those in authority positions over us. And so the pattern that's being set for this child is, I have a large and beautiful emotion, curiosity and excitement. How should I respond to that emotion? Criticism.
Keep it to yourself.
Keep it to yourself, or is this accurate, right? Is this worth getting excited over? And so the emotion is met with critique, right? And that pattern is going to be learned, especially at the age that child was, which was very young, like elementary school. They're learning how they should respond to their emotions based on the, example in the environment that they're living in.
Well, and sometimes it's true, because what that just brought up was there's another instance at, I forgot the name of it.
Medieval times?
Medieval times.
Yeah.
Where this, I was standing there talking to my dad, and I feel something grab my leg, and I look down, and it's this maybe in the last couple of months he learned how to walk, aged kid.
Okay, nice.
And he was just hugging my leg, and I was like, "Hey, buddy!" And then he backed up, and he asked me to pick him up. Mm-hmm. And then his dad came over and was just like, "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." He likes to meet strangers, and I'm so sorry. And I was just I got down on his level, and I started talking to him, and I didn't pick him up, but I kind of put my hands around him, and I was like, "Hey, buddy, this is so cool." And
You're
Atticus
excited.
was there, and I was just like, "Hey, Atticus, look how cool this is." He wanted to come here, and the dad just snatched him up and took him away, and I was just like, "Oh man,
That was a cool moment. He made a friend.
He made a friend." With that said, this is the problem that a lot of clients get into. Is that's okay in a controlled scenario, but this kid can't grow up. He can. I don't saying that. This kid is going to have a lot of pain in his life if he has that same mentality to where he's willing to get picked up by a stranger when he's 12. Or when he's 16, or in his first relationship. He does need to know how to judge the situation to make sure that it's safe for him, both physically but also emotionally. Mm-hmm. But the dad being "I'm so sorry," this is the anxiety that was coming out of this dad was just embarrassment and frustration projected onto the kid. Mm-hmm. Oh man, I don't want that.
It's true. It's true. And then it could have been a wonderful learning moment and be hey, this is a stranger. First we say hi,
Right.
Get down on the kid's level, and instead of snatching away, you took the power away from that moment of being able to actually learn something from
what's going on right now
because of the embarrassment and the anxiety the dad was feeling.
It wasn't the kids.
Which had nothing to do with the kid. But then, as kids often do, they internalize the feelings of the parent, and now they're confused. Well, what is my feeling? What is theirs? Happens all the time. The time.
That's a perfect example of let's say that pattern continues in that kid's life. He continually puts himself down, feels embarrassment about how he wants to connect with people. He puts up walls between himself and people, and then he gets to be a 26, 27, 30-year-old. He's in my office. Mm-hmm. I've addressed that issue with what's actually going on. Well, I feel these emotions. I go, well, where did that come from? That's the why. Mm-hmm. That he's going to say, oh, I've just always been like that. No, you haven't. I don't know that, but I'm going to suggest probably not. You learn that somewhere. You learn that behavior somewhere, going back to what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, well, actually, maybe I'll pause there. You want to explain circle therapy? Because that's what I would do with this person is go straight to circle therapy.
Sounds good.
And with talk therapy, and before I would get into the trance stuff, I'd be doing that.
Okay, well then let's take a pause and we'll come back to the case study here for a second. There's two very great kinds of therapy: circle therapy and systematic desensitization. Systematic desensitization is linear, right? It takes the client from a relaxed state, it puts them into the triggering or uncomfortable or anxious moment and then sits there. Because we know from the body, you can't be in an anxious environment and stay anxious for forever. Eventually, those emotions start to come down.
Right.
And so you're desensitizing, right? I am imagining myself in a room and there's a spider on the wall. I hate spiders, right? And while I'm sitting with the spider, I breathe, I calm my heart rate, the therapist has helped me through it, and eventually I'm like, okay, now I'm present with the spider and I'm calm. The spider comes closer. I find out it's a friendly spider. I'm desensitizing the spider.
Right.
Circle therapy.
Well, sorry.
Yeah.
Because that can happen with trance work in an open-eyed situation, in deep trance, but also in a physical situation.
Yeah.
It's important to note that too. I think for everybody that if the benefit of doing deep trance stuff is that the conscious mind isn't going to be as active when you're doing that. So though systematic desensitization is not very popular right now, I think that especially in deep trance work, it's very, very effective.
It's true.
In that linear way when you use it appropriately.
Yeah, like a great one, like a literal one we had is there was some children we were working with way back before I was a therapist, and the kid would elope when they saw a bee, just run into the street. They're going to get hit by a car.
Yeah, you can't do that.
Can't do that. So we couldn't go to parks and stuff for fear of a bee. They would just take off. And so, the systematic desensitization was first we think about a bee and we calm down. Then we see a picture of a bee on Google Images. We calm down. We see a video of a bee. And then we brought in a bee that was dead in a glass box, right? And then it was a live bee in a glass box, but it was on the other side of the room. And the live bee close to us. And so we closer until now we're out and we're going to, like Lucas Gardens and looking at bees as they're pollinating the flowers in the garden. And so we got all the way through it. That's systematic desensitization. That's a great example. Creating a system and desensitizing the stimulus. Because bee fears learned behavior. They got stung by a bee. So it makes sense. Yeah. Not during the thing.
I was going to say, after all of that, they got stung by a bee? Man.
That's where it came from. They got stung by a bee, and so then they were very afraid of bees,
Yeah.
So now circle therapy is different. Circle therapy, I like it a lot, but it goes in a circle. It brings up the anxiety and then goes back to a place of calm, and then brings up the anxiety and goes back to a place of calm. And so for me, the focus is a little bit more on emotional self-control, right? Like I can be anxious, I can bring up the anxiety, and I can bring down the anxiety. This would be good for like pain management almost is great for this too, right? Like I focus on the pain, I become hyper aware of the pain, I almost bring it up to an 11, and then I start to knock it back down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, right? And then I'm gonna bring it back up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then I'm gonna go back down. And so I'm learning control over my emotions, which is nice because it allows me, if I need to be intense in a situation, I can. It's not just desensitized completely. But also, one of the principles of the unconscious mind is when you bring somebody up and make them more anxious and more tense, it allows them to fall deeper into relaxation.
Right.
So up and then down. So those are the two that we're talking about today. And you're talking about with this kid who grows up to be a 35-year-old man. You would do circle therapy.
Absolutely.
How would you do that?
So a distinction too, well, before I get into that, a distinction between like the circle therapy and the you kind of said this, but I'm just wanting to expand on it based on what I'm going to do with this client is the circle therapy is much more focusing on my internal experience. I want to feel those feelings. I want my client to feel those feelings. I want them to be focusing on those feelings. I don't care what the stimuli is as much. Mm-hmm. With systematic desensitization, it is much more about whatever the stimulus is.
Yes.
And so I can, in trying to get them to, come up in whatever the emotion is, and then come down, and then come up, and then come down, I'm gonna do that probably with something that's unrelated to, let's say this kid comes in with people-pleasing behaviors or dysfunctional relationships because they're codependent.
Sure.
Very common, and that's a situation where they've been told to, swallow their excitement and their desire to make a connection with somebody else. Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring that up in as little of, not a little, but in what's seemingly not related to whatever the presenting issue is.
Something adjacent or totally different.
Might even do it with myself.
Okay.
How does it feel to talk to me?
Yeah, that's good.
How does it feel to connect? How does it feel to connect with somebody who you can't be texting over the weekend with? How does it feel to connect with somebody that's going to go so deep so quickly? And I'm going to focus in on creating that experience through trance work in the moment, in the session, to where they the most safe way I can create it, take that anxiety, create that anxiety of connecting with somebody, and how that can be very disarming to their defenses.
Yeah.
And they do that with me.
Yeah, and I'll add, I think the key there is circle therapy works really well for those who already don't want to be anxious about that thing, because they run so hard away from the anxiety.
That's great. Yeah.
That by starting with the anxiety, you give them permission to be anxious.
Yep.
And actually encourage them to be anxious, so then you can let it go. And a helpful suggestion, I always put this in there when we're doing formal trance, is I'm like, you go into that place, you feel anxiety, and you can feel it, and we talk about it, like in the body, in the brain.
That's great.
In the breath. And so we really focus in on the what. What am I feeling? And I want to intensify that. And I was like, if you can feel that at a 5, you can turn it up to a 6 and then a 7. And
Asking them to.
Right, asking them, like, we're going to become even more anxious in this moment on purpose. And then I give them the suggestion, because any feeling that you can increase, you can also decrease.
Yeah.
You have just proven to yourself that you have control over your emotions.
Look what you just did.
And so when someone's deep in a trance and they get super anxious, and I can see their their heart rate increasing and their breath increasing, it comes from the stomach up into their lungs again, and it's shallow, I'm like, look, you've just proven that you have control because you increased it. And so now you can also decrease it.
That's great.
And so it's such a powerful suggestion because they are feeling it. They're like, oh yeah, I definitely changed my experience of this. It's way worse now.
But even in most of the time, when they go, oh yeah, switches part of the brain, immediately they start controlling it. And they go, oh yeah, I can control this. And the heart rate automatically just goes down.
Yep.
And so, I just kind of like did that in a session this morning. The client was feeling a lot of anxiety about our relationship that was intentional, and then I stopped talking. And then he's like, is this one of those times where you're just waiting for me to talk because I know the answer? And and he already had it. He was just like, you know that I know, and I know that I have the answer to this question, and you're just not going to say it, just because you know that I know it. And just kept going like that. And as he was just like getting himself in this like cognitive like circle, he started relaxing.
Nice.
And was just like, I know what you're going to say. Says the thing. And then it's just like, I know. And I actually didn't, like, what he thought that I was going to say was not the thoughts that were in my head.
Oh, it like never is.
just like he takes a big breath and is like, I know.
I love that they can just project that magic onto me until they can learn to accept that magic for themselves, right? It's almost like they have to displace it. It's like, I have to be the magical being. I have one borderline client who calls me their magical being.
Nice.
That's how they address me. Magical Jesse. And it's like, I recognize that that's very important because it's too scary to accept the magic in them. Yeah. So they need to displace it on me. Yep. Eventually, they will start to accept it. And I constantly suggest and remind in subtle ways that this is their magic. But I'm glad that they can do that in that safety.
And that's the point too, though, is like if they're at that point in being able to do this cyclical thing of bringing themselves up, normalizing it, bringing themselves down, taking a breath, bringing themselves up, normalizing it, they're able to do that. It will be like, oh, you're magic. I don't know how you do that. You're a mind reader. How do you know all of these things? And you're so great. To hopefully at some point, then maybe less likely with a borderline client, but hopefully at some point, then their response is just like, oh yeah, I know, because I can control this.
We're getting there. It's slow work, but we're getting there.
Yeah,
we really are. Circle therapy versus systematic desensitization. They're both very powerful, very important tools. It just depends on, well, what the client kind of needs in that moment. I find the resistant ones do very, very well with circle therapy. And not like consciously resistant. It's like they're resistant because they're trying so hard to not be anxious.
Yeah.
And so by being anxious first and then coming down and then circling back, then you go anxious again and circle down. Every time they try and get anxious, they get less anxious. It's super, super helpful.
Yeah.
So, and that can go deep, and that can go shallow, whatever they kind of need.
That's great.
Anything to add to that?
I love that stuff. Maybe just to reiterate, like with the systematic desensitization, it's still about their experience. But you're taking their trance and taking it from being internal to being external. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, pay attention to your body. Look at the bee. And I think that's good, especially if there's things that are incredibly stimulating in their life that they can address.
Yeah.
But I think the circle model, I don't know. It's more useful for me personally.
I use it a lot more. I would say so. Two thoughts I kind of want to explain before we finish this episode. Systematic desensitization can be really useful in the opposite way of creating, desensitizing pleasure, right? So I've had situations where I've worked with somebody who's pretty severe alcoholic. And actually, it's one of the greatest case studies I think I've ever had, because this person was like hospitalized, lost everything, couldn't get a job, was found naked on the front lawn of their neighbor's yard, right, because of drinking. And so came in and we did one session. And in that session, they walked into, down and down, deeper and deeper. They're very hypnotically suggestible, and it worked really well. Also, I was using the right words, and so it was really palatable for them. So, we get very deep into the subconscious, and they walk into a warehouse and they see like every alcoholic beverage they've ever consumed, and they smell how it's been rotting in here for forever, right? And so we took the sensation of pleasure with alcohol and desensitized it to the opposite. So taking something that's negatively sensated and making it positive, but you can also go the other way of making something that's positively sensed to negative. And that was very effective. They quit drinking after that. They're like, that's miserable. And so it worked really well. And actually, they gave me a text message not too long ago. They've been like, I think 4 years sober now. Wow. Yeah, it was incredibly powerful. It really meant a lot that they reached out and sent me a text too.
That's great.
Nice. So it can go both ways. Don't forget that either, of kind of taking away the power of some things. But in that second point, two things. One is giving them the option. You don't want to force anybody into anything, because sometimes we can unintentionally recreate the trauma of loss of consent, right? Especially like in this course, a lot of you therapists are working with sexual traumas, which deal with topics of consent. You want to make sure, even in that warehouse, I reminded this individual that the door out was behind them, but that deep down they knew that this was something they needed to see and to confront. And so they chose to stay. But I did give them, I was like, hey, at any time you can leave. But there's a part of you that wants to stay here because there's a part of you that knows you need to see this, no matter how painful it may be. And so, of course, they stayed. But they stayed, and they weren't resistant to me because I gave them the option to flee. And so it made that suggestion, that desensitization, even more powerful because I gave them permission to go. And since they actively chose not to go, and I've never had anyone actually leave.
Right.
They never do. But
That's
because
great.
I gave them the suggestion, it made it again, this is not Jesse's thing. This is my thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that? I've got another point, but
No.
pause
I
there.
just want to say how great that is because, I see so often it's like, oh, the therapist is like, this needs to be desensitized, so like, let's do it. Mm-hmm. Especially cognitively, like you systematically desensitize something just cognitively. That can be really dangerous, like really, really dangerous.
Can you explain more about how it's dangerous? Because I agree.
Well, do everything that you were saying as far as like consent. It's like you're traumatizing someone. You're doing it to them. How do you change that thought process? Well, I don't want to change the thought process. I like it. Mm-hmm. Alcohol's awesome. You're like, no, it's not. Like you're taking that from them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's, especially just from a strictly cognitive perspective, there's no option to say that, like, to the unconscious mind, you know that there's a door behind you, then you can leave anytime. Mm-hmm. It's like doing therapy at somebody.
Yeah. Well, and then people sometimes say, well, they're in my therapy office. Like, isn't that consent already? They signed the consent forms.
No.
It's a level of consent, yes, but no, it needs to be reminded deep within the moment because consent forms are very conscious and cognitive. And so you have to do the emotional side of consent as well. And then, as we know, like with greater awareness and conversation around consent is negotiated at every point along the way. You don't just give consent once and then you can do whatever. Like we know that in relationships and sexual relationships and in therapy. So reinforcing and reminding that they are consenting to this process is absolutely critical, absolutely key. Brings me to point number 2. I want to say this. It is going to be important for you as therapists. Let me start here. It's important for you as therapists to keep this framework in mind. As you go through these negative things, your client is going to be distressed. You need to be calm while they are distressed.
Yeah.
I will not allow it. It is forbidden from me for you to be distressed while the client is distressed. You need to be so calm, cool, collected, easy, and rock solid together because they need you to do that, right? And here's the thing. Some crazy stuff is going to happen. We're poking on some pretty volatile pieces inside their unconscious mind. And so they may pop their eyes open and look at you with fear and panic. Right? They may fall out of the chair. They may jump up out of the chair. They may throw a pillow. They may scream. Whatever happens out of them, I want you to take it and be like, that's right. When they do that, you say, that's right, or that's good, or there you go. Let it out. Because in this therapeutic space, everything is good. Everything is permissible. Everything is helpful data from the unconscious mind. And so I think a lot of new therapists will be like, well, what if, we're going through the systematic desensitization and they pop out, right? Good. Say good first and then come up with a reason why it's good later. That really is the way that I do things. Sure. I say, they do something I did not expect. And I'm like, sure. That's right. Very good. And they're like, what do you mean very good? Shit, I don't know. But I'm going to come up with it. This is absolutely true. I'm going to come up with it.
If you're in that mindset, it's easy to come up with it.
It is.
If you have unconditional positive regard for the client, it's easy to...
As long as you truly believe it.
Yeah.
You have to truly believe it. But they'll pop up and they'll be like, yeah, like, I just couldn't stay there. You're like, that's right. Very good. You're like, what do you mean very good? I didn't do it right. And they'll be like, you just showed yourself that no matter how intense things get, no matter how great of a hypnotherapist you have, your consent will not be violated. Right? They may be able to do things with your life, with your money, with your body, but you will always be you, and no one can take that from you. Right? There's a little reinforcer right there.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen next time they come in and we do systematic desensitization again? Now, don't give up either.
Sure.
Don't let them pop out and then you give up and be like, that didn't work. No. That means it did work. That means you do it again the second time.
And we're going to do it more.
And we're going to do it more because they were able to test the boundaries here. That's good. This one failed. It was a success. Then you come and do it next. Do you think they're going to be able to go deeper because they prove to themselves that they can come out at any state of depth? Of course.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be so much deeper the next time and so much more powerful. But you had to have that predicate step first. So I just want to say, you got to have that foundation of trusting your client and trusting yourself. Everything is good, right? Having that there is going to be critical. Doesn't matter what they do. It's all great. We had to cover that.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, bravely soldier through the holidays. I hope you enjoy. Think about some of your own trances, maybe some of your own circle therapy, right? You press into the family conversations, then you go for a walk. Then you come back and press into the conversations, then you go for a little stroll outside again, you know? Whatever you need to do to care for yourself these holidays, I'll be doing it too, so.
Watch those trances. Yours, theirs, everyone's.
And watch Die Hard.
And Elf.
And Elf. Oh, there it is.
Oh, man, I'm so sorry.
No, it's good. This is the secret at the end. I mean, it says Elf on the sweater, so I think. Oh, man. Enjoy your time. Care for yourselves. It's so important. It's so important. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, bye.